Here is a production from Miriam Gennari's Sustainable Scoop.
Welcome to another edition of the Sustainable Scoop. I'm Lise.
And I'm Alistair.
Today we'll be visiting one of the many nonprofit organizations here in Arlington, Phoenix Bikes, and we'll be learning with them how they're coping with this COVID-19 pandemic. Are you ready, Alistair?
Well, I have my gloves and I have my mask. I am ready.
And now I'm joined by Emily Gage, Executive Director of Phoenix Bikes. Hi Emily, thank you so much for letting us stop by today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found Phoenix Bikes?
Sure. I actually used to live in this neighborhood, so Phoenix Bikes was the community bike shop within my neighborhood. I lived behind where the shop is located now and actually owned a condo across the street.
So one of your leading programs is the Earn a Bike program, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about that and how it gives opportunities and leadership skills to youth in this community and why it's better to earn a bike than just giving a bike away.
Yeah, our Earn a Bike program for youth is our real signature foundational program. How it works is students can either do it in our shop as a drop-in program or as an after-school program at their school. We do about 5 schools per semester, most in Arlington and then some in Alexandria. And basically the program takes them through basic bike mechanics, tools, parts of a bike, how to fix a flat tire. They'll go through 5 weeks of that. They'll work on practicing those skills by working on a bike for a community member in need. They'll fix up that bike that gets donated through partners that we have throughout Arlington. And then once they've done that, they're eligible to earn their own bike. What we really emphasize is hands-on learning. We really emphasize the importance of hard work, of persevering, of building social skills, of building leadership skills, and so the program really builds all of that. We do operate 100% on bike donations. So any of the bikes that you see in our shop are donated either through community members or through trade-in programs at local bike shops, and those bike shops then donate to us. So we're really grateful. We really emphasize sustainability in our shop and wanting to keep bikes out of landfills and sort of rusting away in people's garages.
Again, with this COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of businesses have had to make a few changes to their businesses. So what changes have you all implemented at Phoenix Bikes?
We have had to entirely suspend all in-person youth programs, which has been hard for us. That's the bread and butter of what we do, and it's what we really love. So we have had to do that in the shop. When we reopened under something we're calling no contact operations. So we are providing sales and service, but it's by appointment only. So community members can book online or they can book over the phone. They get an appointment slot, and we have appointment slots every half hour. We don't allow the public into our shop at all. The community member is dropping off their bike or taking a test ride of a sales bike without ever coming within 6 feet of our staff members.
Can we see how the process works?
Sure, let me get you the bike out and have it ready for you.
Fantastic.
So this is the bike I think will fit you best. I would say take it out for a test ride and see how well it works. You don't have to give me a credit card or any ID, just take it out for a test ride. And then if you have any other questions, just give me a call. I'll be inside.
Fantastic. So I just call you, we'll stay 6 feet apart the whole time.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. It was definitely nice to test ride it. That's crucial to making sure that the bike works for the person and you can go down quite a nice distance. And yeah, this was a nice fitting bike.
This bike actually just came in as a donation drop-off, and the first thing we do is take it straight back to the patio. So I rinse it down, wash it off with soap, and then rinse it off again and just let it dry. And once it's done, I take it back inside. And I have to do this with every bike that comes in.
And does this make sure that it is free of any COVID that caps on it?
And right before the bike goes out to the customer, we also give it another clean over with a rag and alcohol.
Fantastic. What happens if someone takes the bike on a test ride but ends up not purchasing it?
Yeah, so we do the same procedure.
What is the cost for these types of bikes? And during this pandemic, have you seen an uptick in the amount of sales?
Yeah, so most bikes range between $50 to $800, just depending on the bike that you want to get. Kids bikes start out at $50 and go up to $200. And then adult bikes, hybrids, roads range from $285 to $800. Since we opened up 3 weeks ago, it's just been busy. We sold over 25 bikes, and most of them were hybrids and kids bikes.
So how are you all planning on engaging the youth when it's actually impossible to get them physically together right now?
We have done a couple things. We've started instituting what we call Saturday sessions, which are virtual educational programs that are an hour every Saturday afternoon. So we have heard from women who took this epic bike journey when they were teenagers from Canada to Mexico with their mom and a group of other teens. We have talked about some common myths and truths about biking, and we have a lot of other programming that's planned. With our Earn a Bike program, we're having to modify the curriculum. So we're right in the process now. My youth education team and I are working through what is it going to take for us to take that program virtually. Now we're going to probably have to deliver a bike and a complete tool set and some other parts for them to work on at home and then do it over a virtual platform. So we are going to be sharing more about that in the coming weeks.
So fundraising is a big part of your nonprofit organization, and you actually had to cancel one of your big events this year. And what are you and your team thinking about doing to actually keep those funds incoming?
So we did need to postpone our spring Makers Ball fundraiser, which is our largest fundraiser of the year, but we've been able to pivot and do some other things. So we had a wonderful, generous donor put up a $10,000 match to help us rally community funds. And the Arlington community has just responded in such an amazing way. So we launched a Fix a Flat campaign. We kind of explained to people that as we were trying to flatten the curve of the coronavirus, we also were seeing that it was flattening our cash flow projections for the spring, which is typically a really critical period for us bringing in income for the rest of the year. And so that has been a really successful campaign. If people want to donate online, you can go to phoenixbikes.org and there's a COVID-19 fund, and it's easy to donate that way. We've also seen community members rally around us by donating bikes, and that really is the lifeblood of our shop. We have instructions on our website about the kinds of bikes that we're able to use.
So lastly, how do we find out more about you guys and just keep in touch?
The best way to get in touch with us is our website, phoenixbikes.org. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so all gifts are tax deductible. That means that any financial gifts are tax deductible, but also if you want to donate a bike, that in-kind donation is also tax deductible. There's a way on our website to sign up for our newsletter at the bottom right of the homepage, and we would encourage people to do that. It's the best way to find out all the happenings at Phoenix Bikes, what's happening with our youth, our staff, our community programs. So we would encourage people to sign up there.
Thank you so much, Noe and Emily, for letting us visit Phoenix Bikes. You are running a tremendous operation. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Lise, and that's the Sustainable Scoop. See you next time.
Welcome to this week's edition of Don Hammond's Arlington Weekly News. You've already heard from Miriam Gennari's Sustainable Scoop. Here's the rest of the show. We'll have news, a roll-in about the most recent Arlington Town Hall, CBB or Community Bulletin Board, 55+ news. And that's our show. Now it's time for the usual social media reminder. You can watch the Arlington Weekly News on our YouTube channel at Arlington Weekly News and the number 1, also on Facebook with some updates tucked in, and on the radio on WERA 96.7 FM. Now, the news. As of Sunday evening, May 10th, reports show the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Arlington was over 1,300. And, of course, these figures are still likely to increase because of restrictions of access to testing. As long as drive-up testing remains available only to symptomatic patients, the potential for the virus to spread between apparently healthy people will remain. Meanwhile, the June Democratic primary for County Board has been cancelled. With the withdrawal of former candidate Chanda Chone, Libby Garvey has been declared to be the party's nominee. According to an article from our friends at Arl Now, at least 6 inmates in the Arlington County Jail have been released ahead of schedule. Public Defender Brad Haywood said he also petitioned Virginia Governor Northam for clemency for 63 local inmates. Commonwealth's attorney Parisa Degani-Tafti said that she had gotten together with the public defender and also with the sheriff and concluded that they needed to thin out the jail population for the safety of the inmates and the sheriff's deputies. On Friday morning, May 8th, Don Hammond's Arlington Weekly News called Ms. Degani-Tafti and asked a single question. Prior to being released into the public, were the 6 inmates tested for COVID-19? Ms. Deganittafty replied that she didn't know. She then suggested that we call the sheriff's office. After our suggestion that it would be more effective if she made the inquiry, and being reminded of the political sense of being able to answer this question once the general public started asking it, Ms. Deganittafty agreed to email us with a good contact in the Sheriff's Department. As of Tuesday, May 12th, we are still waiting for Ms. Deganittafty's follow-up message. Now, as promised, here is the roll-in about last week's town hall meeting. Arlington County Board held another virtual town hall on Friday, May 8th. The participants included some familiar names: County Board members Libby Garvey and Christian Dorsey, as well as Deputy County Manager Jim Schwartz, Dr. Ruben Varghese, and Aaron Miller. The meeting started promptly at 12 noon with opening remarks by Christian Dorsey. He addressed some questions about the coordination of the eventual reopening of certain activities in Arlington with neighboring localities. He gave the hypothetical example of the District of Columbia allowing bars to open before any of the other surrounding jurisdictions, with the likely result that those bars would become magnets for visitors from all around and attract too many people for safe control of infection. Libby Garvey also mentioned some conversations with Governor Northam, who has acknowledged that the COVID-19 situation in Northern Virginia is more problematic than in much of the rest of the state due to its high concentration of population. The governor provided some general guidelines and conditions for reopening or resumption of activities. One of these was an observed 14-day downturn in the number of confirmed positive cases. Another one was a 14-day downturn in the number of hospitalizations. A third one was the verification that hospital facilities and equipment, along with testing capability, would be sufficient in case of a reversal. Libby Garvey re-emphasized the need for coordination throughout the region since the virus was likely to get through any weakness in the system. There was not as much new material as on last week's gathering. Much of the content consisted of updates. At this point, the meeting was opened for citizen questions. One question involved the 5-fold increase in Arlington cases, but with a number of different data points, and which ones citizens should rely on. Dr. Varghese presented 2 slides. The first slide was the familiar display of 2 curves, one extreme and one gradual, demonstrating the advantage of taking precautions with the assumption that the virus would eventually burn itself out. The second slide was a more complex table showing the number of hospitalizations in all of Virginia, in Northern Virginia, and in the broader area. Dr. Varghese recommended looking for consistent reduction in hospitalizations over a 14-day period, which has yet to happen. He also mentioned that a flat curve is not the same as eradication of the virus, which would not be possible until a vaccine is developed. The second question came from someone with a symptomatic, vulnerable relative who has been unable to get tested for COVID-19. The suggestion was for the sufferer to obtain a prescription from a doctor, hospital, or urgent care facility. Libby Garvey fielded the next question: can Arlington County decide who gets tested? For example, can schools be given priority? The answer was nuanced. The state of Virginia ultimately decides, but they consider requests from the counties. For example, jails would be prioritized on a facility basis. When asked, when will there be testing for asymptomatic patients, Dr. Varghese replied that there were simply not enough supplies and equipment available yet. Aaron Miller reported the good news that some 200,000 test kits were on the way from the CDC. However, it must be noted that considering Virginia's population of 8.5 million people, 200,000 is less than 2.5%. There is still a plan for a third testing site for walk-up patients. As before, testing availability is limited to symptomatic patients with physician authorization and an advance appointment is still required. As before, Dr. Varghese and others encouraged residents to wear cloth face coverings or masks, wash their hands frequently, and continue to practice social distancing. One item that was mentioned for the first time was that, although more protective than cloth masks, the official N95 face masks are much more difficult to breathe through. A question came in about the mandating of cloth face coverings. The reply was that it was under consideration, but that voluntary compliance was still preferable, since mandating requires enforcement, which strains the system. People who have multiple cloth face coverings should wear a fresh one each day, and single mask users should wash their regular mask each evening. Other topics included taxes. Property tax billings will continue as usual, but payment extensions are possible. Specifically, there is a program in the works by which a 10% payment will be accepted on the original due date, with the John Marshall Bank covering the balance for repayment over a 10-month period. It was not specified whether or not any interest or service fee would be applied. An update on observable symptoms was requested, and there were some changes noted. The original symptoms were said to be fever, coughing, and difficulty breathing. To this list have been added chills, muscle pain, sore throat, and the loss of smell. Rarer cases included nausea and diarrhea. That being said, Dr. Varghese stated that sufferers should first stay home and consult a physician before seeking testing, since there are other illnesses with some similar symptoms. More questions came in about reopening, but Jim Schwartz observed that since Northern Virginia seemed to be having it worse than the rest of the state, they would have to proceed at a more cautious pace. Christian Dorsey fielded a question about the decision-making hierarchy. The governor's executive orders have the greatest force. Then there are certain regional concerns, and then the county has discretion in some of the details of implementation. In response to a question about Arlington's overall financial health, Mr. Dorsey replied that Arlington was faring better than many localities, but that the situation was still severe. We are sad to report that there were still more questions about the park closures, specifically tennis and basketball courts. As before, the answers from the board members and guests were diplomatic, but there were no plans to reopen those facilities before June. One questioner complained that wearing a face cover while exercising made it hard to breathe. The attendees let that one pass, but we at Don Hammond's Arlington Weekly News would observe that it's easier to breathe through a mask than through severely damaged lungs. Libby Garvey wanted to acknowledge the special help coming from the library system, because much of the library's staff has now switched to distributing food. In response to a question about obtaining aid from FEMA, Aaron Miller replied that this was done at the state level, but that there were other sources of aid that were also being pursued, such as the CARES Act and HHS. Arlington's goal with these agencies is to maximize allowability. There was yet another question about the parks, this time about best practices when they finally do reopen. To this, Jim Schwartz replied that, in the face of changing information, those concepts were still evolving. The last substantive question was why Virginia is so far behind the rest of the nation in testing, being in third from last place. Dr. Varghese then enumerated all the components needed for testing. First, swabs to gather samples, then transport media for shipping the samples, protective equipment for the persons administering the test, laboratories with the necessary reagents for testing the samples, all of which are presently in short supply. The doctor did first list a symptomatic patient as a required component, but that's not technically accurate, and there is no shortage of patients anyway. The meeting adjourned at 1:17 p.m. with the by now usual reminders about face masks, social distancing, and hand washing. Now it's time for Community Bulletin Board, or CBB. Under the heading, Let's Share the Trails, Arlington's Parks and Recreation Department sent out a message with some mixed signals and missing messages. In one place, they advise trail users to step off the trail when pausing to enjoy a view or take a rest. Later, they reported a sighting of a white-spotted slimy salamander for the first time since 1977 under the headline, "Please Stay on the Trail." Also, just above a listing of golden rules of the trail, they posted a curious picture of two people standing by a trail intersection holding two outstretched umbrellas between them to apparently demonstrate the proper 6-foot social distance. Because their arms were also extended, they were actually standing at least 9 feet apart. In addition, they would have been blocking the intersection for anyone approaching. Although the golden rules were nice, they made no mention of the concept of walking or riding in single file. We have observed 2 pairs of cyclists, each riding side by side, just barely passing each other, with a combined 4 cyclists using every inch of trail width, while pedestrians, including some children and elderly users, were present. Elsewhere, the Arlington Philharmonic has announced 2 new virtual music programs. The first is called Crescendo. It's a chamber music program that will operate with students performing together, but from remote sites. Rehearsals are in progress using advanced video syncing applications. The second, more ambitious project will be an attempt to deliver the Philharmonic's much-loved Pops in the Park in a digital format. Fans and supporters are encouraged to visit their website at www.arlingtonphilharmonic.org. As always, donations are much appreciated. For those who wish to remain at home but still want to stay physically fit, Arlington County Parks and Recreation are offering the Glow Up at Home Challenge. It's a 3-round at-home workout consisting of a series of simple exercises. The list can be found by Googling Glow Up at Home Challenge at content.govdelivery.com. There are also 2 recommended YouTube videos: How to Stay Fit in Quarantine and Teen Home Workout. Now on to 55 Plus News. A visit to the 55 Plus website showed a discouraging calendar. It shows no events. Even on the Parks and Recreation website, the only published events are a Red Cross Babysitters Training class on June the 6th and, still, the Arlington County Fair in mid-August. Those interested in the class would do well to call to confirm at 703-228-4747, since registration is required. We will try to present this next item from a positive perspective. Effective May 12th, Arlington County will make a partial return to the good old days of yard waste collection. Longtime residents will recall a time many years ago when yard waste was not picked up by the county but simply burned in backyards. Well, burning is no longer allowed, but curbside pickup has been suspended, so it's a partial return. Arlington residents wishing to get rid of yard waste can do so at 2 locations, 4300 29th Street South, or a drop-off site at the intersection of 26th Street North and Yorktown Boulevard, provided they come between 8 o'clock a.m. and 12 noon, Mondays through Fridays, and bring a driver's license to prove residence. At least seniors without cars have a good excuse for letting the yard work go for a while. And that's all we have for news for seniors, and that's all we have for this week's show. At least 2 of us will be back next week for the next edition of Don Hammond's Arlington Weekly News. Be careful, be safe, be well. And as usual with the television version, we have a little bit of extra time. So here's some music, just for entertainment.
This is the one where we all run into the sunshine. This is the one where we all race up to the sky. This is the one where we finally break free. This is the one where we all fly into the rainbow. This is the one where we all jump over the moon. This is the one where we finally learn to see. We meant to do it yesterday. That's what we said. But yesterday